There's something wrong with this house. Not in the way horror films usually suggest, not in creaking doors or looming shadows, but something quieter, something already there, an unmistakable absence. In the Babadook, the horror doesn't arrive from outside. It's already embedded in the walls, in the silence, in the spaces left behind after something has been taken away. Director Jennifer Kent has said she wanted the film to feel placeless, that it could take place anywhere and have been made by anyone. But watching it, that idea becomes more complicated. Because even without the vast landscapes typically associated with Australian horror, the film still feels deeply connected to them. It just brings that sense of isolation inside, where it can now take shape.
He had just turned 7.
Traditionally, Australian horror doesn't live inside the home. It lives out there, in the breadth of the land, in places that feel too open, too quiet, too indifferent to human life. Films like Picnic at Hanging Rock and Wake and Fright don't just use the landscape as a backdrop, they turn it into something unknowable yet hostile, almost a character in itself, a looming Gothic presence. But Australian Gothic isn't just about location, it's about tension between the familiar and the unsettling, between everyday life and something repressed beneath it. That's why, unlike the innately daunting castles and grand estates of the larger Gothic genre, Australian Gothic films often focus on ordinary settings, rural towns and homes where something just feels slightly wrong. Not because of what we can see, but of what we can't. At its core, Australian Gothic isn't really about monsters. It's about what sits beneath the surface. Unspoken histories, social anxieties, emotions that refuse to stay buried. And when those things do surface, they don't arrive cleanly. They distort the world around them. They turn the ordinary into something uncanny. And that's what makes the Babadook so unsettling. All of that is still there. It's just contained. Barely, and only for now. At first, the Babadook presents itself as a familiar kind of horror. A figure in the dark, a knock on the door, a monster trying to get in. But the film gradually destabilizes that idea. The Babadook doesn't behave like something external. It knows everything about its victims. It can be anywhere at any time, and as invasive as it may seem, it didn't come from outside. It was already in the house, just waiting on a shelf.
Where'd you get this? On the shelf.
More specifically, it was already waiting in Amelia. In Gothic storytelling, monsters are rarely just monsters. They are expressions of fear, abstract anxieties given physical form. The Babadook follows this pattern but strips it back even further. It isn't tied to a distant myth or any tangible threat. It's a monster of the mind, of grief, exhaustion, shame, and resentment. For years, Amelia has forbidden herself from acknowledging that she carries these feelings in the first place. When the Babadook arrives, it's a harbinger of doom, a warning that anything suppressed will one day surface again, even worse than before. So inevitably, Amelia detonates. Every aspect of the creature is tied in some way to Amelia. It taunts and entices her with visions of her late husband. It dresses in attire not dissimilar to her son's magician get-ups. Even its very name sounds like a child's gibberish, mocking Amelia's struggles as a single mother who can't help but feel bitterness towards her son. This is all to suggest that the real horror here isn't about being attacked. It's about being unable to escape what's already inside. So, focusing again on the Australian side of things, even though Australian Gothic doesn't require landscape to function, it has certainly distinguished itself throughout history by taking advantage of the unique setting. Why then does the Babadook choose to avoid it? The film doesn't eliminate the outside world entirely, but it does keep it at a notable distance. There are moments beyond the house, but they never feel expansive or liberating. They feel disconnected, as if the house and and by extension its occupants, exist separately from everything around them. That separation is important because instead of confronting a hostile landscape, Amelia is confined to a claustrophobic space that traps her with her own internal state. The house becomes a kind of closed system, one that holds grief in place rather than allowing it to dissipate. Its rooms are repetitive, drained of colour, almost static. There's no sense of movement outward, only inward, and at its centre is the past. The basement, where her husband's things are kept, functions as a physical space of repression, something buried below but not gone. That absence shapes the entire film. Ever present, it defines how Amelia moves through the house, how she relates to her son, and how the space itself is framed. Unlike the vast openness of traditional Australian Gothic, where characters can at least disappear into the landscape, here there's nowhere to go. The horror isn't being lost in space, it's being stuck inside it. On the surface, The Babadook may not look like a distinctly Australian Gothic film, even to its own director. It's not interested in the isolation of the outback, and it avoids the scale and openness that usually define the genre. In fact, in a spatial sense, it feels largely separated from all of that, but it doesn't reject those ideas either. It embraces their spirit and transforms them. By isolating its characters within this one home, the film internalises the core concerns of Australian Gothic: repression, instability, and the inevitable return of what has been buried. The landscape isn't gone, it's just been contained, and the monster isn't something external to defeat, but something internal to confront, and ultimately to learn how to live with.